Shalom, welcome. This is Avraham Shira from Nahar Shalom, and this is our Friday midday shiur for Shabbat. We are going to learn from Likutei Etzot of Rabbi Nachman and his main student, Rebbe Natan, and he writes a very interesting idea, an idea that I found challenging when I first learned it, and like all challenging things, there's usually something good beneath the hard work to understand what is being taught to us. So this is the second letter of the section on Shabbat. And the Rebbe says, Al yedei shmirat Shabbat zochim le'emuna. By keeping Shabbat, we merit to faith. By keeping Shabbat, we merit faith. Now, when we see the word zochin, or merit faith, the implication is that it's being given to us in merit of something. It could be given to us in the merit of our innocence, our purity, our boldness, the tests that arise from keeping Shabbat, for example. Certainly, my grandfather's generation, when they got off the boat in New York and they needed work and they were told they'd have to work on Shabbat, that was probably the biggest test that a new immigrant would have to face when they got to America, aside from other lesser, more coarse things, we shall say. And that test of keeping Shabbat was a very hard thing to pass when you're a new immigrant with a new country and new language and no work and no money. You know, it's a big thing. Thank God most of us nowadays don't have to go through that kind of test. But zochin le'emuna, by keeping Shabbat, we merit faith. Now you might reverse it and say, well, if I have Emuna, then I'll merit Shabbat. I believe there's a God. I believe he gave the Torah. And I believe that it's full of divine commands that are called advices, that are good for us, that make life worth living, meaningful, purposeful, directed, focused, empowered. Those seem to be pretty good reasons to keep the Torah. But the Rebbe's language is always very precise, and he's saying by keeping Shabbat, we merit to Emuna, meaning that my Emuna is like a ladder, and step after step you go up the ladder of faith, and when you look down at the ladder and you say, wow, I just passed through that lower place. I just passed through a place of less faith, and now I'm at a higher faith, and I feel the difference in that faith. Now, a couple of good measures to have in our pocket, a couple of good rulers, is to measure our faith. One is patience. How patient am I? If I have real faith that Hashem is running the world, then why am I impatient? Let him run the world. And the other one is when I look at my faith and I think of faith, do I feel relief from anxiety, relief from pressure, relief from the things that drive me to make decisions that I am not ready to make? So that's also an aspect, by the way, of faith in ourselves, that, if God's running the world, he's running my life, and if he's running my life, why am I feeling pressured because this salesman says, if you don't buy today, you don't get it. That classic line. But anyways, so by keeping Shabbat, we merit to a higher level of faith, that these laws and the things that we do on Shabbat are not just constrictions of our time, that we can't, go to a baseball game on Saturday afternoon, etc., etc. Okay. So the next piece, the Rebbe says, V'kol tzedakah shosim ein la shlemut, or, and all charity that we do, that does not have complete or, complete light. In other words, the charity does not have complete light. Ki im aidei Shabbat, shehi b'chunat emuna, which is an aspect of faith. So here we go again. Another measure or angle to see the relationship between Shabbat and faith. That when a person gives charity, a lot of people give charity and they don't keep Shabbat. Whether it's a coin at Penn Station or you write a check to the, Notre Dame Cathedral. I'm not sure if that's, let's not go there, Avraham. But whatever charity we do, if I don't have faith in the whole system of the creation, that there is a creator and he is giving life force to the creation, then there's a break in the system. There's a break in the energy flow from above to below and from below to above. Now, a lot of people said, why do I need God? I just do good because it's good to do good. And that sounds nice. That sounds pretty good. Do good because it's good. The problem, though, is not when things are good, when things are really bad. And I don't want to do good because I have vengeance in my heart, or someone hurt me, or my country's turning around on me. All of a sudden, I don't have God in the picture, then my do good because it's good to do good is like, okay, that's a nice philosophy, but I got more difficult things on my plate. So that is a kind of like a new age idea that I've heard bounced around a bit. Do good because it's good, and it is good to do good. But if I don't have faith in it, the faith in the Creator, that my giving that coin of tzedakah, of charity, is part of a system of giving and receiving that I'm part of, that I'm receiving every moment I'm alive on this planet. And actually, even after we leave our bodies and we're in heaven, and you're sitting in your lounger in Gan Eden learning Torah with the tzaddikim, you're still receiving. Your soul is getting to you from somewhere. So if I cut off that system of the giver, the ultimate giver, capital G, right, then my giving is not whole. And that's what he means here, that the charity without faith is not complete. It is called charity, but it's not complete. And it's problematic. And that's why it's problematic is another whole discussion we're not going to go to in today, because it'll take us far afield. Nonetheless, listen to this. And all the blessings and all the positive influences that come down by giving charity, all of them are not complete. If a person doesn't keep Shabbat at some level, then all those other good things, those blessings, those positive influences in the world that you're able to achieve are not complete without Shabbat, which is, again, this aspect of faith. Why? A blessing is a blessing. Whether it's the blessing of health, of children, of money, of Torah, the blessing of a good mind that can learn and remember things, and creativity is a tremendous blessing. To write beautiful songs, to create beautiful paintings. This is all from the idea of blessing. Mozart didn't sit down and write a whole, concerto without even editing it, because, he learned that when he was 3 years old. No, it just went through him. It came through him from a high level. And so on and so forth, the blessings that we see in this world. Some people are just gifted to go in the stock market and make 50 million in a couple of years. And other people, they can struggle with stocks for their whole life and, they're schlepping along. There's a blessing with mathematics, with business, everything. Okay, nonetheless, without this idea of Shabbat, Emuna, keeping Shabbat and faith, it is not a complete blessing. So again, we see that when Emuna is taken out of the picture, something very important changes in the paradigm of creation. Let's go a little further. And And this idea, he goes on to tell us that Emuna is the Makor Bracha. Faith is the Makor, the source of blessing. So all these blessings we've been talking about still have a source. And that source is faith itself. Faith, now if you look at faith, it has many levels, as we said in the beginning of this little talk, that faith is a belief system. In other words, a series of beliefs. I believe God created the world. I believe he created the world in order to give of his infinite goodness to finite beings, because that gives him joy, just like it gives you joy to give a gift to your children. And if it doesn't, I feel sorry for you, really. And maybe you have good reasons to feel that, but that's something you talk to your therapist about. But really, the idea is that faith is a system of beliefs, but it's a lot more than just, I believe in this and I believe in that and I believe in this and that. No, faith is a transference in the mind from passive to active intellect. Now, this is a concept we've talked about in other shiurim, and we're going to have to keep talking about it because our nature is to become passive. There's this inertia. There's this psychic inertia that goes on in our own position. We happen to be creatures that love to sit in the trees, watch the sunset. A lounger and an iced tea, and we're good. But that's not really why we're here. That's passive intellect. Active intellect means I am thinking, I am choosing, I am imagining, creating, dreaming, forming, just like God did. The Kabbalah teaches us that God, for 974 generations, Tatkat Dorot, which comes out to be close to 20,000 years, God contemplated creation before he created it. Now, that's a long time for contemplating. But anybody who's creative will first sit down with their idea and cogitate over it and think about it and bounce it around and look at it from different sides before you actually put the paper, the pencil to the paper or the brush to the canvas. There's some period of creation going on, of contemplation of creation. Those Tatkat Dorot. Okay? So we too, as being little miniature creators, need to give ourselves that time to move from the passive intellect to the active one. And I'll tell you the truth, this is something that's good to do alone. Because when you're with other people, it's very hard. Because your attention is diverted. Your consciousness is split between the others and yourself. And this is the kind of work we need to do alone. To sit down now, am I in passive intellect? Am I just accepting that my boss says I have to work on Shabbat, okay, or even another day that you don't want to work? Well, let's think about this. Do I want to work on Shabbat and lose or not lose my job? Or do I want to go ahead and say, look, I cannot work on Shabbat, I'll have to lose my job? And I brought the example of, a few generations ago where that test was very prevalent for, immigrant Jews coming to America. I'm not judging them at all. But we know it was a very difficult test, and I imagine the numbers weren't too pretty on how many people actually decided to become unemployed because of Shabbat. I'm not sure how I would stand up. Now it'd be easy to say, yeah, sure, I'm religious, I live in Israel. Who's going to tell me I have to work on Shabbat? The army? That's different. Then you have pikuach nefesh. I don't think it's pikuach, it's not a death threat to work in a laundry on Shabbat. But when you're a soldier, you're an officer, you drive the president around, and if it's something that's protecting people, then God says, it's okay, drive. Anyways. But this idea of completeness, shlemut, right? Shlemut is from the lashon of shalom, peace. That we don't feel completeness and peace until all that which is missing has been added. Here's your beautiful new Ferrari, but there's no steering wheel. It's not complete. Can't do a thing with it. We can start it up and listen to the motor. right? So we're looking for the completeness, and this also applies to our personalities, that we have good qualities, all of us. And then we have some qualities we'd like to get rid of. Fine. But completeness is what keeps us on the path. It keeps us looking for more, like, wait a minute. And you'll see, I work on a thing for a while, and then you feel good about it, and you've gotten through it. I don't get upset about certain things anymore. And then something else comes along to make me upset. Well, that's because I'm not complete, and I'm still working towards that idea of completion. All right, so but the Rebbe's teaching us this tremendous foundation principle that Shabbat, faith in Shabbat, Shabbat in faith, those two kind of cousin concepts, that's where the completeness is. And so it doesn't matter how much good we do, if I don't have that complete faith and Shabbat with it, it's like these rabbis that don't keep Shabbat and they preach the Torah. I don't understand. I was raised conservative. Nobody kept Shabbat, so it wasn't an issue. But if a guy starts telling me about Shabbat and he doesn't keep Shabbat, wow, doesn't ring true to me. I oftentimes have told people that I've learned with over the years, anything I say, I'm trying to do it myself. I might fail, and I'll get up and do it again. But at least I'm in the game, And because hypocrisy, we find it everywhere, but religion is the worst place to find hypocrisy. Because it's not about us, it's about the Creator. It's about a much bigger vision of life. Okay. So all the things the Rebbe says, kulam haserim, everything has a lack that's created in this world. It's created with a little lack of some kind. Ve'ein lem shlemut ki ma'idei Shabbat kodesh, shezi bechinat Emuna. And the only way we get to shlemut is through Shabbos Kodesh. In other words, you take a wheat berry. That wheat berry is not going to be very pleasant to eat. It was created incomplete as food for man. You cannot grind up a wheat berry very happily and get the nourishment you're looking for. If you turn it into bread, you're going to get satisfaction. You can make blessings on it. You can share it with others. So wheat itself is created incomplete. Oil from the earth is not going to make your car run. It has to be turned into gasoline. That's another idea of something that's incomplete. And so on and so forth. Everything, if you look at it in a certain turn, you'll see that there's an incompleteness, right? Whether it's coming from a cow or the earth or a tree, whatever it might be. So therefore, what do we learn from this? We have to look for the completeness. And the Rebbe is giving us the secret. The secret is Shabbat Emuna. That when I come with Shabbat, I keep Shabbat, then all of a sudden, I'm back into the system of belief in the Creator and the creation, that apple that I'm eating, which, by the way, I think the rabbis say an apple is one of the most complete foods because you can eat the whole thing. It's not so pleasant to chew on the apple seeds, but nonetheless, it's a food where, like an orange, you can't eat the peel, the rind. It's too bitter. So it's incomplete. You have to peel the orange. And you don't want to eat those seeds. It'll ruin the fruit. And, I once said to a friend, look at the perfection of God. That He gives you a fruit like an orange, and it gives you life, and it makes you feel good, and it brightens your eyes with a little bit of holy sugar, right? But if you eat that pit, it's bitter. It doesn't taste good. It ruins the taste of the orange. But why? Because God wants you to plant that seed to create more oranges. And if you eat the pit, if you eat that seed, you're not going to plant more oranges. So you see, the part of the continuity of creation is woven into the fact that things are not complete. And that I have a place in this completion process. And so, now, of course, if we buy thousands of oranges a year, and how many trees do we plant? Okay. Well, that's because economies have evolved, and if we lived alone, we might be more careful with the seeds that we keep. Okay, so when we understand that He puts the bitter taste in the thing I'm not supposed to eat it's teaching me, well, it's still for something else. It's still to contribute to the next generation, like the famous story about the rabbi was planting a carob tree. A farmer was planting a carob tree, and the rabbi asked him, why are you planting a carob tree? You're not going to get any fruit from that tree for 70 years. And he said, but it's not for me. It's for my grandson. So he's already completed it. He has faith he's going to have a grandson. And that grandson's going to come and say, look at the great carob tree my grandfather planted for me. That's a wonderful thing. And that is joining God in the continuity of creation. And we do it by having faith. Now you say, well, Avraham, wait a minute. I have to keep all these laws of Shabbat, and I can't watch TV, and I can't go to the game, and I can't cook my favorite food. How is that completing the cycle of a wheat berry being ground and kneaded into dough and baked and turned into bread? Where's the connection? Well, it's like this. The process of joining in partnership creation, that I'm willing to take the wheat berry and turn it into bread. Joining the process is already submitting my mind to a certain amount of work. And if I'm not submitting my mind to the work, it's going to be bitter work. And there's nothing more bitter than keeping Shabbat and being bored, sitting around on Saturday afternoon wishing you could watch the NBA Finals. That's bitter. A guy wants, like a high school kid. I used to know people that kept the TV on all Shabbat so they could go in and out of the room and check the score. Okay. It's better than, okay. And you could say, well, Avraham, what's the big deal? We're not lighting a fire. We're just turning on a switch. But everybody knows that electricity is really condensed fire. And you don't need proof of that. Just look at lightning, right? But still, why is that faith in Shabbat and keeping Shabbat trip the trigger of creation? It turns on creation. Why? It's a question it's worth taking a shluck of coffee for and thinking about. How is it that what I hold in my mind turns on the rest of the process? Well, at risk of beating a metaphor to death, you take a wire and you touch it to the light bulb and bing, the light goes on. I need that light. It's dark. I want to read. Bing, the wire has electricity in it, but it needs to get to the bulb. So, of course, the light is Hashem. And I need to connect to Hashem. So when I do things that are above my intellect, like keeping Shabbat, God says, look at that Jew down there. He's keeping Shabbat in order to connect to me. I have to connect to him. My reputation depends on it. If you ask any military person, on Shabbos, we don't go out to the field. We don't protect the borders. It used to be this way in the ancient days. Soldiers didn't go out and protect the borders of Israel in the early days of Shabbat. Later, when the nations around us started to attack us, it was a little different. But still, there's this huge amount of faith to stop guarding your borders or stop guarding your car. In Bad Ayin, we don't even lock our cars. For years, we just kept the keys in the ignition. And people would call and say, can I borrow your car? I said, yeah, the keys are in the ignition. There were weeks where we didn't lock the front door of the house. That's faith, friends. That's faith. And that's not just faith in God. It's faith in God and the other people and my neighbors. It's a beautiful thing. That's connection. And that connection turns on the light of creation. And God says, well, I got to come through for these guys. They're coming through for me. They're believing in me with their limited intellects. So we see that faith and Shabbat are wound together because Shabbat's demanding of us things that don't seem to make sense. What does it matter whether I cook or not? What does it matter whether I wash or not? All these works, the 39 works of Shabbat, are derived from the 39 works that were done to build the Mishkan. the portable mikdash in the desert. Why? Why does God tell us the source of blessing is in when you don't do anything? Sounds great, don't do anything. But why is that the source of blessing? Because not doing something is actually a statement. That's what Shabbat's about. I'm not going to pick up my phone on Shabbat. I am not going to write down the beautiful Torah idea that I want to share with you on Sunday on Shabbat. I'm going to wait till after Havdalah. Well, you might not remember it, Avraham. What are you going to do? You'll forget it. And you know what? My masters told me, no, if you forget it, it means you're not supposed to have it yet. And if you remember it, then it is time. And that's also faith. Faith in your own creative power and memory. Because I know that my memory is really not me. It's an extension of a much bigger thing. The memory of God. I remember before I was religious and I was just exploring Judaism, it was pretty hard in the beginning because I was coming from a completely secular background. And I went to Reb Shalom Schwartz's Shabbos table in Los Angeles. Many of you probably have heard of him, Schwartzy. He's a very special guy, gifted and kind and loving. Alav Shalom, Nishmato Be'eden. Schwartzy, he had all kinds of people at his Shabbos table. And I'm one of these guys. I just got off I-10 with my van and my bench press and my basketball and my blender. And, and I showed up at his house because my sister sent me over there for Shabbos. And I didn't want to keep Shabbos. I wanted to enjoy LA. And I knew there was a gym around the corner where I could go play basketball. And this is real basketball, folks. This is street ball. This is with guys that are bigger and darker than me, to risk a PC statement. These guys are talented basketball players. And I wanted to go out and try my luck with them. I said, Schwartzy, can I go out and play basketball on Shabbat? And I saw him start to stretch, and kind of, like groan. He says, well, it's not really the spirit of Shabbat, but I understand you're not really keeping Shabbat yet anyways. So you can go, but if you come back and you shouldn't shower with hot water, shower with cold water, or whatever. So it was funny because I went to that game and I got set up in a rebound play where one guy bent over beneath me and the other guy pushed me over him and I did a backflip. And I was lucky. I was lucky to land on my shoulders and not my head. And afterwards I said, maybe I shouldn't have been playing basketball today. And it started to click to me that maybe this is the idea of also guarding Shabbat. That if I guard Shabbat, Shabbat will guard me. And, I've been used to a little rough and tumble activity before, so it wasn't like I was upset about it. And then I went back to Schwartzy's, and in the middle of the night, I couldn't sleep, and I saw his Shabbos shoes under the table, and I thought it was a very provocative thing for me. This rabbi speaking to people all day and night, and then he's so tired, he just leaves his shoes under the table and goes off to bed. And there I am alone in the living room. I said, there's a poem here. There's a poem there. The rabbi's shoes. He can't even remember. He doesn't remember his shoes because he just walks off to bed barefoot because he's so exhausted from giving of himself to other Jews. So I had this idea for a poem, and now here's my test. Now I want to write this poem down. And what do? I'll forget the poem. And God forbid, it's such a big deal. And so the way the story went was I decided I'll write a few notes. So I did break Shabbat again because I wasn't yet there. And I felt like the poem was worth it. I'm praising the rabbi and da-da-da-da. And so what happened was after I wrote it, I lost the note for months. I kept looking in my papers for that note of that Shabbos poem that was breaking Shabbat, really. And I remember, I was a little further down the road. I said, I'm going to do tshuva. I'm sorry I wrote on Shabbat Hashem. I shouldn't have done it. I should have had faith. I shouldn't have written on Shabbat. I won't do it again. Like within a day, I found that poem and I wrote it up. Where it is now, probably have to write it again. But you see what I mean? There's a process, there's a system here that when we keep Shabbat, Shabbat keeps us. I think Reb Shlomo said that many times. So I bless all of us to stand up to the little tests that we have on Shabbat, because they seem little, but that little bit of test is actually going to give us new faith. And that's going to help complete creation, and that turns the switch of the light bulb of the Creator himself inside us. And then we have this, how do I describe it? It's like empowerment, but it's self-contained empowerment. It's not power that I need to express to the world. It's power that keeps us whole. And that's the wholeness that we're looking for through Shabbat. And just as we know Shabbat completes the 6 days of work, so too there are 6,000 years of creation, and the 7,000 year is the grand Shabbat, the great Shabbat, where humanity steps into its divine identity completely. So every Shabbat we should taste a little bit of that divine identity. So all of you, God bless you, and have a good Shabbat wherever you are and however you keep it. It should be towards the wholeness and the completion of ourselves and this creation, because we're only here for a little time, and then the big Shabbat comes down the road. God willing, we'll see you on Sunday. Shabbat Shalom.